Welcome to Functional Philosophy. I'm Charles Tew. That's T as in Tango, E as in Echo, and W as in Whiskey. This is episode number 39, and its title is Why Socialism Fails. Hello everyone. So before I get started today, I will notify you that I have thumbtacked some thick blankets to my walls. I hope this does something to reduce the echo that is present in most of my audio. I think all of it so far. I'd like to get rid of that, and we will see if this helps substantially. Anyway, so today's topic is why socialism fails. Well, why does it fail? Socialism fails because it is fundamentally anti-intellectual. What do I mean by that? Well, here's an analogy you may find clarifying. Suppose you have a computer. Now, a computer has, within it, a CPU, a central processing unit. This is the component that is responsible for doing the math the computer has to do. It processes the instructions given to it by your input and the other hardware of your computer. It is often likened to the brain of the computer. Now, it has only a certain capacity. It can process instructions only so quickly. Okay, now suppose your friend also has a computer, and your processor is faster than his. Well, you might say, why don't we just hook up all of your components to my processor, and my processor will run both of our computers? Mine is faster after all, so why doesn't it do the thinking, quote unquote, for you, for your computer? Now, if your processor is much faster than his, this may work. Assuming you have enough extra power left over, you're not utilizing all of your own capacity, your processor's capacity, this may work. But now let's say you want to do this for 10 friends, 100 friends, your whole neighborhood, the whole country, the whole world. Is it better to use your one processor, because it's better than everybody else's, to control all of their computers, or is it better to let everyone have his own processor, even if they're all inferior to yours? Well, obviously, it is best to let everyone's computer be run by its own processor, because no matter how much faster yours is, it is not going to be fast enough to overpower the millions of other processors in the millions of other computers. Even if yours is the best alone, in comparison to any single other processor, it will simply be overwhelmed by the requirements that all of the other processors combined are dealing with. Now, capitalism is the system that says, why don't we let every computer use its own processor? Socialism is the system that says, some processors are better than others. So why don't we let the best processor, or the best few processors, control all of the computers? Well, if you know what's wrong with that, with computers, you know what's wrong with that with people. And that's the problem with socialism. Now, it's not the problem. There are some problems with this analogy if you take it the wrong way. First, I'm not saying people are computers. Computers do not think. Computers don't actually do math. So I don't want to make any false implication there. But in a core sense, it's true. There's a core parallel here. Everything is limited. CPUs do a certain kind of thing, and they can only do it within certain limitations. Same with the human mind. We can only think so much. We can only get so much mental work done in a given period of time. And because of that, it is disastrous to set one mind to control all of the other minds, which is what all planned economies do. What planned economies do is say, let's crowd out all of the other inferior minds and centralize production according to the few best minds. Well, as I said, if you know why that doesn't make any sense to do with a computer processor, you know why it doesn't make sense to do with human beings, with economics, with production. Now, the other thing you may take the wrong way here is, I am not saying this is the fundamental problem with economics. This is a Hayekian point. This is a point Hayek made. And Hayek was good in some ways, but he made some major mistakes. He allowed for a limited welfare state, and he was, as far as I remember, a bit of a subjectivist. You know, the libertarian economists are fond of the subjective theory of values, so how can the government control you if values are subjective? They can't tell you what you value. There are major problems with that. So Hayek is not ideal. However, this is a good point if you understand its place. And in order to understand its place, you have to understand that the implication here is not that if we had a human mind great enough, we could crowd out all the other human minds. If there truly were a machine, like in Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, I think it's the final story, there's this machine that is just so capacious, it can predict everything and determine what's good for human beings better than all human beings combined could ever do. That is still impossible, no matter how good of a mind you get, because human beings have to choose their own values. Values cannot be forced on people. Even if you know what's best for someone, even if you have this crazy computer that could figure out what's best for a person through some kind of analysis, it's still counterproductive to force it on that person, because that will not make him happy because it was forced on him. I've spoken about this elsewhere. If you want an elaboration on this, you can go watch my video on Richard Spencer and Sargon, or you can look forward to a forthcoming essay which will involve this topic. But for now, it's just important to understand that values are objective. They're not subjective. They're not just whatever you choose. And they're not intrinsic. They're not there apart from your choice. You have to choose the right thing, but you have to choose the right thing. And this is why even if you had some super intellect, it is illegitimate for that intellect ever to crowd out your own mind and make your decisions for you. That would turn you into a vegetable, and what's the point of living then? So if you understand the context of this analogy, it's useful, but just don't go running off with it to some invalid places. The core principle here is that it is true that socialism fails because it violates the integrity of the individual's mind. And it's individuals who think. It's individuals who figure things out. I mean, there's a reason the world is getting better as our population increases. It's because we have more minds figuring things out. Oh, more minds, more thinking, more rationality, more production, better standard of living. Wow, big surprise that when the Enlightenment happened, when freedom happened, when America happened, the Industrial Revolution happened. Everyone has seen that chart of standard of living that's just flat throughout history and then almost 90-degree angle upward around 1776. Why? What's the causal relationship there? Well, that's when minds were set free. Throughout history, we had this massive resource, the human mind, but the vast majority of them were clamped down under the same kind of system, the same kind of program, essentially, involved in socialism, fascism, all kinds of government control. It was monarchy, some kind of tribalism where the chief rules everything. It was one mind is going to control all of these individual people. And then the Enlightenment comes along and says, oh, why don't we not crowd out all of these individual minds? Why don't we unleash the power of all of these additional CPUs. And then, lo and behold, massive increases in everything good. So this is really just a manifestation of the fact that it is reason. It is the human mind that produces everything good. It produces values, material values, spiritual values, art, all of it. All of that increased in the most inconceivably tremendous way when freedom was implemented. Not even fully implemented, but substantially implemented. Massive increases in everything good. That's just the power of the human mind. And so when you clamp down on the human mind, well, what do you get? The lights go out. That's what happens in North Korea and East Germany. It's a simple cause and effect relationship. You leave minds free to reason, those minds produce more values. You clamp down on those minds with central control, or any kind of force. The same thing would happen in anarchy, even if it didn't lead to centralized control, which it would. But even if it was just warring gangs forever, nobody would be able to think long-term or reason because force would proliferate everywhere. So anyway, the point is, when there's force stopping people from thinking, no reason, no production, or very limited. As soon as you sweep that away, now everybody is free to use his own mind, think, produce, create things. Simple relationship. But now, what about all of the murder in socialist, communist, fascist, collectivist regimes? What about all those corpses, the slaughter? What about all of that? Why does socialism kill? Why does it not just fail, but why does it kill? Well, this is also pretty simple when you think about it from a certain perspective. What is communism? What is socialism? What is fascism? You know what they had on the German Nazi currency, the National Socialist currency? The group before the individual. That was the motto on their currency. This is how strongly they believed this. Sacrifice for the group. Altruism. Now, what does altruism mean? It means sacrifice for other people. That's moral, right? That's Jesus. That's how everybody thinks of soldiers. What's the most moral thing to do? To sacrifice your life for someone else or for a lot of other people, which is called collectivism. That's the most moral thing to do. Now, what is the appeal of communism, of socialism? It's altruistic. It takes care of the poor, of other people. It's the system of altruism. It is altruism in politics, which is just collectivism. Communism says no, you shouldn't produce for what you can get out of it. You should produce in order to help other people. Don't be selfish, be altruistic. That's how this system is run. That's how all centrally controlled economies are run. That's the point of running them that way. Because we can't let everybody go run around and be selfish and do what he wants. We have to force them to do what's for the greater good, what's good for people in general. We have to force them to be altruistic. Well, let's do a little equation here. If the ultimate expression of altruism is self-sacrifice, sacrifice of your life for another person, what do you think you're going to get with a political system based on altruism? So sacrificing your life is the highest form of altruism. What's going to happen if we force that on society? Oh, we're going to get a lot of corpses. We're going to get a lot of dead people who did the most altruistic thing. The measure of the mountains of corpses, the number of people who are slaughtered by communist regimes, that's not a perversion. That's a measure of success by their standard. Altruism is you sacrifice for the group. That's the highest good. That's the best thing you can do, right? People regard that as the most moral thing possible. Sacrifice your life for someone else. Well, what do you expect to get from a system that says, all right, let's implement altruism at the political level? If you expect anything other than mass slaughter, you are engaging in some serious evasion. That's the whole point of the program. You can't idolize self-immolation, implement a system explicitly on the basis that it is in line with this principle of morality, and then say, oh, what the hell? People are dying. I didn't expect that. Yes, you did. So, to sum up, socialism, all collectivist political systems fail because they crowd out most of the reasoning minds in existence in favor of the few best ones, although they're never the best ones anyway. This is another interesting thing. People think about taxation, regulation, government control as just lowering economic growth, as just kind of shrinking what we have. It's much worse than that. Government control doesn't just give us less of the good things. It's not just, oh, we have good companies, but they can't succeed as much, so we have smaller good companies. Oh, no. What government control does is actually invert the whole thing. It entrenches bad people. You don't just have fewer good, successful people when you get a system of control. You replace the good people with bad people, with the kind of people who don't mind going along with the rules. You know, Ayn Rand said, the better the mind, the less it is willing to put up with political commands, with regulation. Well, when you get a system of regulation, as regulation increases, you don't just get fewer good people at the top, you get more bad people. All the places I've worked, it's pretty clear. There is like a corporate level that has to deal with the politics, and so there are all these rules you're supposed to follow, but you can't follow if you're going to be successful. And so they pass the buck downward, all the way down to the lowest employees, where the rubber meets the road, and the idea is, okay, there are two sets of rules. There's the rules we have to tell you to follow, and the rules you have to actually follow to get things done. And it creates chaos and confusion and inefficiency. And it gets people promoted who can think in this Orwellian way, who have destroyed their minds, made it elastic in a bad way, who can put up with more cognitive dissonance, who don't care so much about doing things their way, about production, the bottom line reality. They don't care that much about that. Those people float to the top. Why? Because now there's another set of standards. It's not just you have to succeed in reality. It's you have to live by this arbitrary set of rules, and better people are less willing to do that. Anyway, that's a whole issue for another podcast. I guess I gave you a summary of it just now. But anyway, the point of this episode was socialism fails because it clamps down on most of the minds that actually produce the goods, and it kills because it puts into practice the principle of altruism. And the principle of altruism says the highest virtue is to die for other people. Well, that's what you get when you put altruism into practice. A lot of people dying for other people. If you have any questions, you can send me an email at charles.a.2@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment on YouTube or send me a message through my website, which is at charlestew.com. There you can find information on and links to all my work, including ways to support it. And the best way to support it is with a recurring donation on Patreon. If you don't want to do that, you can go to iTunes and just leave a positive review for the show. That is actually a tremendous help. If you haven't done it yet, it only takes a minute, and if a substantial number of you do that, that will actually really help the popularity of this podcast and get these ideas out to more people. I mean, the thing is, very few listeners actually leave reviews. So even if you have very few listeners, if they are dedicated and they care about the ideas, and a greater proportion of them go and leave reviews and do things like that, that makes a huge difference. You can overpower a show with a bunch of semi-interested, non-fanatical, non-zealous listeners. And the whole point here is to create moral zealots. That's my goal. And I've actually been happy that I have attracted that kind of person. That shows me I am doing exactly what I should be doing. So anyway, don't discount how much of an effect you can have by just leaving a positive review for this show on iTunes. That will really help to get the ideas out there, which will make all of our lives better. So if you have 60 seconds or so, you can do that, and that will be a big help. In any case, thanks for listening. Let's meet again in episode 40.